And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is JT Compeau. JT is the founder of The Content Interpreter. He is a speechwriter and thought leadership and public speaking consultant. So I thought he'd be someone great to have on here. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome, JT. Thanks for coming on board.
Peter, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to go given what you do, I want to just sort of dive right in. So most, if not all, of the folks that we work with at Thought Leadership Leverage speak, right? And to some, it's a very, very important part of their operation. To some, it's an occasional piece. So why don't we start with what are the things they should be thinking about when taking the content that might be in a book or in an academic journal or something like that and turning it into a speech, because that's a very different modality with very different sort of rules and doesn't always translate from the written word. So give us sort of the world according to you relative to how do you frame a good speech?
I think a great speech is framed on stories and anecdotes. And so a lot of what I do when working with clients is trying to find those stories that encapsulate the sum total of what it is that they do. And so a lot of the work that I do is trying to find the insight and the connective tissue between, for example, their origin story and the topic at hand.
Got it. So let's say you've got content that gravitates more in the analytical data, sort of that side of the universe as opposed to motivational. How do you get the data to integrate into a story that resonates with humans? Because humans, my belief, maybe I'm wrong, are wired to hear stories, not swallow PowerPoints.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that certainly when you're working with data and working with analytics, it's a bit harder to find those stories, but they are there. I have worked, for example, in the past with a noted college professor who studied a particular area of human psychology, and she had outlined 5 stages of development in this particular area. And so I think what you do is you take each individual data point and try to link it to a story, something that has happened in your past, something that is accessible and authentic to an audience.
Got it. Let's talk about accessible and then sort of moving towards the continuum of authentic, right? Because I think there's a group of speakers that tend to be more entertaining than they are authentic. And there's a time and place for everything, but just in terms of connecting on a human level, give me your thoughts on that. Is it better to go entertaining? Is it better to go authentic?
I think you really have to play to the strengths of the person for whom you are writing. And so that's something that I'm always considering. There have been some people that I've worked with that are just very naturally entertaining. And so you want to lean a little bit more in that direction. And then there are people that really, the work that they're doing is very important to them, either because of something that occurred in their childhood, someone supported them, and so therefore they're trying to carry on a legacy. For example, that was a key part of a nonprofit executive director for whom I wrote. So I think that you really have to lean in and tune in to the person for whom you're writing.
Got it.
So playing to those strengths.
So let me ask a couple of questions here. One is, if someone is already a fairly successful speaker, yet has never worked with someone like you, a speechwriter and a thought leadership consultant in that way, one would say, well, why? What's the additional value? So tell me a little bit about that. Like, how do you take someone that's already got some traction, things are going well, it appears to be going well. What is the value that they can expect to receive from working with a professional speechwriter that doesn't have a horse in the race? If you
Well, I think the value is having someone in your corner that will objectively look at your content and find those entry points for the audience. I think the benefit of working with someone like me is that nearly every single person with whom I work, I am the layperson to their industry. And so sometimes I'm the perfect candidate to approach because I might ask a question, well, wait, what is this? And once you ask those questions, well, what does that really mean? It can be a breeding ground for further stories, further insights, further anecdotes. So I think that's the value that you get. And then the second piece of value is that I feel like if you think about athletes, for example, everybody needs a coach. Even the
Right?
greatest athletes need a coach. And I don't think I would call myself a coach,
Right.
not by a long shot, because some of the people for whom I work, they have the public speaking skills that they
Sure.
need, and they far surpass me and many others even. So I think that it's more about having someone in your corner in a very consultative type relationship, and someone that will be an objective third party to some extent, but also someone that wants to see the material elevated to a point where it doesn't necessarily meet anyone else's expectations, but meets the high standards that most of these people set for themselves.
And I would say it's probably objective with a twist of thoughtful criticism, right? Because it's one thing to tell a speaker that just came off stage, hey, that was awesome, that was wonderful. That's really, quite frankly, not all that helpful if they're looking to improve. So you can tell them, hey, these are the three things that went well, but the story that you told here, actually, let's try to do that in a different way or sequence the modules differently or whatever the case may be. Would you agree?
Completely agree. I think the benefit to what I do is that we work so hard on those things on the front end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the part where I really enjoy the actual speech writing. And I would consider myself primarily a speech writer, but even more than that, a content interpreter. That's where the name comes from.
Yep.
And we get to work on those stories pretty far in advance of it ever hitting the stage.
No, I love it. So, in my work with authors, thought leaders, and speakers, pretty much same client profile that you've got, oftentimes what I find is there's a place in our work where we start sparring around the content. And what I mean by that is being a thought leader, being an author, being a speaker by its very nature is a very solo activity, right? It's not a team sport. It's an individual sport, typically, if you were using the sports analogy. Then we start to sort of unpack the content. And by sparring partner, what I mean is I'm questioning, well, is that really the model? Is that really true? Or tell me more, or take that a different way, or that's not really as clear as what you say, even if the reaction to date, from the audiences and such have been great. And what I find is there's this breakthrough moment for them where they're like so happy and so relieved to have someone to sort of get into the ring with them because they've done a great job to get it as far as they can individually, but they haven't had that opportunity to have someone challenge them a bit and push a bit and push a bit. Does that is that parallel with your experience working with clients?
That does ring true to me. I think one example really comes to mind where I was writing for someone that wanted to share all of her stories. She had a yeah, exactly. She had a 20 plus year career from which to share stories. She was delivering a commencement speech, and she wanted to share all the stories. And I had to say, well, first, this has gone on a bit too long, or more than a bit, really. And second, well, you already told this story, and that kind of matches or doesn't even really have the same impact as this story, but yet they're very similar. So you can cut this one and still achieve the same purpose. So yeah, that what you're saying really does resonate with me in a big way, and it's kind of fun to see what they think of their own life experience, and then to see the reaction from someone like me who's going in and saying like, well, isn't that kind of the same thing? It is very interesting work, and I don't know if I would say that we necessarily sparred over it, although that sounds like kind of fun if it's done in a productive way. But it was certainly a push and a pull.
Yeah, and what I mean by sparring is it's in a collaborative sense where they haven't had a lot of opportunity to really discuss and debate and think through with someone that is not there to just shake their head and go, yeah, that's wonderful, but to challenge them a little bit in the spirit of raising the game and making sure that content is as tight as can be and resonates as strongly as it can with the appropriate audiences. So it's not, arguing for the sake of arguing. That's what I meant by sparring.
Oh, no, I totally get you. I was just
Yeah.
having a little fun with the word
Yep.
spar.
No, and I think with your story, story, if you will, the woman with a lot of stories, oftentimes you have to ask, well, what is the purpose of that story, right? So we all have the, and then a funny thing happened on the way to the airport, sort of the story, but it has to serve a point and it has to move the keynote that you've got in a direction or plant a seed for something you're going to come back to in 20 minutes. Just because it's a cute little story doesn't necessarily mean it fits in the valuable time that you've got in front, a valuable limited time you have in front of an audience, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And I have to say that all of these stories taken on their own were really powerful. I think usually the first consultation that I have usually lasts about an hour to 90 minutes. I think I was on the phone with this woman for a little over 2 hours
Did you get a
because
word
she
in?
had some.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, well, my job is to listen,
Yeah.
especially in ed
Okay.
stage. But she had so many great stories taken on their own. It's like, well, I could sit here for hours and listen to you. But when we got to constructing the outline,
Yep.
and even before that, looking for the insights and the structure of the speech of how this thing ties into that thing
Yep.
and it flows into this. Yeah, there had to be something that ends up on the proverbial cutting room floor. So what you're saying resonates very well with me,
Okay.
and it is very interesting to see how someone that has so many stories and has had such an impactful career still needs that assistance or could use that assistance, find value in that assistance of putting it together in a single narrative. And if I had to say, what is the biggest joy about the work that I do, that would be it right there,
Got it.
is helping people see the power in their own stories.
Got it. So I'm always really fascinated by the way people work. And what I mean by that is you're a speechwriter, there's other speechwriters. I'm a consultant, there's other consultants. But you have a way of working, you have a methodology, you have processes, you have frameworks, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to work with you? Like what the process is and what the methodology is and how you've developed and refined that over the years working with lots of clients.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for recognizing that. I would say first, it's always in the consultation. So when I first meet with a new client, it's about figuring out, am I the best person to work with you? Because my job is to plug into their unique voice, their unique sensibility.
Well, let me ask you on that though. So
Sure.
I've worked with lots of ghostwriters, worked with lots of speechwriters. Some of that, am I the right fit for you, is mutual, and I would say there's two dimensions to that. There's the qual and the quant, right? So on paper, you're clearly qualified, but is there a qualitative personality, some intangible that might lead either you or the client to go, this just isn't a fit, and that's okay.
That's an interesting question. I can't say that anything concrete has come up where it's just been like, no, this is not a good fit at all.
Okay.
You don't get me at all, and that's not me complimenting myself on how brilliant
You
I
just haven't
am.
had the client
But
from hell yet. Exactly.
well, maybe
I
I
hope
don't
not,
know,
but
but no, I think that it just gives everybody a chance to evaluate whether or not there is a good fit objectively before going too far down the road.
okay.
And I think that when you are trusted with someone's story, as I am blessed to be on many occasions, it really is just about me showing respect to my new client, saying, I may not be the perfect person. And if you sense anything is a little amiss,
Sure.
then let's talk about that and see if we can correct it. And if it can't be corrected, then there are wonderful writers out there that might be able to tap into your sensibility a little better.
Okay, so that's the first step. What happens after there's a sort of a skill match or a fit?
The second step is the kickoff call, which is personally my favorite part. And it can go 60 minutes, 90 minutes. In the case that I was just talking about, it went a little over 2 hours, where you just talk to me about your story, about the topic at hand, what you want to achieve, what you believe is the core message. And I am furiously taking notes and listening and asking questions and probing a little further. And I take those notes and I marry it with whatever the client may have given me prior, either published work or prior talks or what's on their website
Video, whatever. Yeah.
or a book that they've written, if that is applicable. And I come up with the insights
Okay.
as I see them. What is the connective tissue? And that actually spills over into the second step, where I present them with an outline and a structure saying, based on what we've said, based on what I've read, based on what I've seen, here are some interesting things that I would like to point out, or things that I think would really be accessible to an audience. Here's what's rising to the surface as I see it.
Got it. Got it.
So that's the second step. And then the third step is the hard work of writing the speech.
Oh, that. Oh, that
Yeah,
part.
I almost forgot to do
Yeah.
that.
Oops.
And then we do edits, and sometimes there are particular specs.
Sure.
I just finished a speech working with someone that will be delivering the speech for an international audience, and so there needed to be some a toning down of some of the wordplay, because the interpreter had to interpret that for an international
So the
audience. And
nuances,
so
nuance of language might not translate in a more global audience.
exactly. And then the other aspect of that, which I think is most exciting for me, and I would hope most empowering for the client, is they have the opportunity to say to me, I don't think I'd really say that. I've read this a couple times. I don't think I would really actually say that. Can we do it a different way?
Right. So those words don't feel natural coming out of my mouth, or that's not a phrase I would use, or something like that.
Something like that. Or, I don't think I've spoken to this kind of audience before. I don't think that plays
Okay.
especially well.
Got it.
And I can see why you would think that on paper, but I've been up there and I just don't think it would work. And that, I think, is where if you want to talk about sparring again, that's where you get the really exciting and constructive dialogue, because you're working on it together. And at the end of the day, the end product is really something that the client wrote.
Love it.
That's something that I really want to emphasize for them, is that, no, you wrote this. I'm just the content interpreter. I'm the person that's working with you. But the content, all of the winning stories, everything that might get a laugh, that's all you.
And that's important, that they feel that sense of ownership and pride, that it wasn't somebody jamming up a teleprompter to have them be a talking head, right? They have to own that.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it works if they don't own it.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that we all know of speakers, and you can picture whoever you want in your head. It's like they sound different when it's clear that they're on a teleprompter versus something that may have just been coming to them extemporaneously.
Well, that's one, and then the other example is, I mean, I know for me, for example, when I take something that I wrote that's done well as a blog, and then I go to put it to video, and it might be I'm literally in front of the camera going, that just doesn't work when you say those words out loud. Like when you're reading it, it's fine. It feels clunky. It doesn't flow. Like you got to just change the wording a little bit, because the spoken word is a little bit different than the written word, at least in my brain, the way it resonates to people. And I think there's a sensitivity to that develops.
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. Well, as we start to wrap up here, JT, give our listeners some advice if they were in the process of hiring a very smart and savvy speechwriter like you.
Well, thank you.
What are the things they should be looking out for to make sure that they're going to be happy and their expectations are going to be met? What might they ask of that person?
I think that they need to be looking for someone that understands them. And what I mean by that is not totally and wholly, because you can't get that from a single conversation, but someone that is showing a willingness to learn about them, to become an expert in them. And that's the other thing that I pledge to my clients. So that's something that I would absolutely encourage everybody to do. And I think the second one is an offshoot of that, is someone that listens well. If you find that they're doing a lot of the talking, I'd say more than 50% in those initial conversations, that may be a sign that it might not be the best fit. Because really, at the end of the day, like we were saying just a moment ago, it's about taking ownership over that piece of content, and he or she cannot really get to know you if they're not listening.
Got it. Well, great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I appreciate you sharing not just the frameworks, but sort of your philosophies and processes around speech writing and developing content from both your side of it and the client side of it. I think it was a lot of great information there. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure and great to speak with you.
My pleasure. Thank you. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.